Excellent. David, thank you so much for making the time to speak with us. You are calling from Australia.
That's right. Here from Sydney at the moment, although I spend a lot of time traveling in over in the UK.
Okay, wonderful. David, I let me introduce you briefly, but I would like to hear from you as well about yourself. So this is Dave Harris. Dave is the founder and MD. He's got about 20 years of experience across top international sports and esports organizations, including international and domestic cricket, English Premier League, and Football League clubs. And his last traditional sports role was general manager, National Rugby League in Australia. He has also worked as a senior leader at Boston Consulting Group. But I don't want to steal your thunder, David. Please share with us your journey briefly and a little bit about yourself before we delve into the questions.
Sure. Good to meet everyone out there digitally. My name is Dave Harris. I'm based in Sydney, but I've lived various places around the world. Lived in Sri Lanka for a year when I was working with their cricket team there, and I've had 11 years over in United Kingdom. I was originally a sports physio. I never quite made it as a professional athlete, so being a physio working with teams was the next best thing. But I remember at one stage I was working Premier League football and I was working on a player that was getting paid £60,000 a week, which was more than I was getting paid in a year. So I thought there was some opportunities maybe to do things better in sports business. So I did the MBA at Oxford and transferred from sports medicine into sports business. Spent a bit of time at management consulting at BCG. And then, yeah, as you mentioned, my last real job was a general manager at National Rugby League, where I headed up marketing, content, digital, commercial, and club and state services. But I left in 2016 to start Guineverecapital, which was going to be a sports investment business. We're going to buy some traditional sports teams. But I bought an esports team as a bit of a side project, just seeing a sort of a trend that was happening globally, and then ended up pretty much pivoting all in on esports and gaming. And my 2 year rolling plan, 7 years later, I'm still here doing it. So even though I still do dabble in traditional sports, I've mainly been on the journey of esports and gaming, which I find a fascinating space to be in, and it's cutting a path which I believe traditional sports will follow at some stage.
Yeah, no, wonderful, Dave. It was such a diverse background. So keen to hear about your insights around obstacles to opportunities here. And when we talk about business models here, with your experience around traditional sports and esports, as you've just said about new models here, can you share with us, some of these business models in this field and how they've evolved into remain competitive and profitable, especially now in this digital era?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was really worried about sustainability of traditional sports, and I still am. I think the biggest sports in the world, the NFL, the English Premier League, that they're going to be fine. But as you sort of go down the pyramid, is getting harder and harder for those next tier of sports, and even the big sports. I think with times will have to adjust their business model. And that's why I'm sort of excited about esports, particularly when it comes to the digital side. But whether it's a game of sort of tiddlywinks basketball or an esports game in the middle of the happening in the middle, it's still got a very similar business model around the outside. But I think one of the challenges is that the weighting of these various revenue streams is starting to change. Traditional sports is basically held up by broadcast rights, and Rupert Murdoch was a genius back in the day. People have different views on him when it comes to his ethics and his politics, but it's pretty impressive for a guy who had a small newspaper in Adelaide in Australia to become the mogul he did. But he really disrupted the model back in the 90s by buying out big television rights for traditional sports and putting them behind paywalls and on cable TV. It was obviously the Sky TV and the English Premier League in Europe, and likewise with Fox and the NFL in North America. And for 20 years or so, that model didn't really get disrupted. But you see now that the amount of cable cutting is going up. Advertising dollars are going down on that linear television. So at the moment, traditional sports and maybe reality TV, the two things you can't really time shift without getting your results spoiled. other things that are keeping linear TV alive. But I think outside of the biggest sports, and even in time with the biggest sports, that model and the checks are going to be able to write is going to drop away. So when it comes to esports, it's mass digital distribution. So rather than Fox or Sky, where we go out on Twitch and YouTube and the digital channels, the biggest esports events in the world. The League of Legends World Championships has over 100 million people watching it, which is phenomenally large. A lot of those eyeballs are in China, which is very difficult for people to commercialize, and that's obviously the biggest event. There's many smaller events, but I think if you look at that as one of the marquee events, it's interesting because there's no paywall. Anyone with an internet connection can jump in and watch it. So the trick is how do they monetize that reach, and you'll have some of the biggest sponsors in the world, the MasterCard, Tiffany's, Mercedes are sponsoring those events, but they're really integrated in an authentic way. But when you're not having paywalls or big media rights deals, it's really important to sort of diversify the revenue streams. So sponsorship is the sort of primary revenue stream in esports and gaming. But sponsorship can't just be an ad, and we'll probably touch on it later. But the younger generation, like even though they annoy us, we're conditioned to accept a 15, 30-second yell out from a sponsor in the middle of something we're trying to watch or beforehand. The next generation isn't as tolerant about that type of thing. So it's about how you integrate the partners into event. And I think League of Legends World Championships is fantastic, where you've got the Tiffany Trophy case opening. Oh, actually, the Louis Vuitton trophy case opens up to reveal the Tiffany's trophy side. So it's about actually integrating the sponsors, and sponsors that actually get it and are being part of it, rather than trying to shout their own message at an audience that really isn't interested. So I think sponsorship is the next one. Merchandise is the big revenue stream in both sort of traditional sports and esports, but in esports there's obviously a lot more digital merchandise. You can still get a Capital hoodie, and it is a subculture that you can rock. But I think digital inventory is something that's incredibly scalable, and just the people of our generation sometimes find it hard to understand people buying a skin, sort of an in-game cosmetic item, but it's just like we've got our Gucci jacket on trying to impress our friends in person. If you've got a rare skin that you're rocking in game, it's sort of something that you can show off amongst your friends. There's memberships and subscriptions. Your membership proposition is normally around your match day in traditional sports, but in esports, it's with digital distribution, it's more around communities. And then, at the end, it's sort of match day and prize money. Even though there's stadium events, there's less stadium events in esports and gaming. So, the proposition, the value proposition needs to be different. But when it comes to prize pools, the biggest ones are worth about 40 million for one computer game tournament, and that is effectively crowdfunded for people buying things inside the game. So, I guess a long-winded way of saying sort of all the revenue streams are quite similar, but when you look at sort of the digital environment, the digital skew is far higher, and as I sort of alluded to at the start, I think traditional sports is going to have to learn to pivot into that space, and even the media rights deals, Amazon and those type of players, Google, YouTube are now actually bidding alongside the Skies and the Foxes of this world, and I think it's going to keep moving more and more towards that spectrum.
Yeah, no, David, that's such an interesting perspective around the business models, and it does take individuals and leaders and their mindset to make those shifts as you actually go through that, and we'll come to that very shortly. I'm keen to hear about some of these engagement strategies in the meantime when we even coming into esports, for example. Mentioned it's at the forefront of engaging all these digital natives. You've mentioned about different regions and the Gen Zs and so forth, but what strategies in your view have proven most effective in connecting with this audience that are now very much in this digital age? I mean, we have been for a while, but it's even becoming more prevalent now. But how can these strategies be applied to not only one particular sector, but across different sectors, just to attract all these demographics? What's your views on that?
Yeah, I think the key word is authenticity. It gets thrown around a lot in our sector, but it's true. And I think that there's a generation gap, and every generation thinks that the one following them is completely different. But I think just due to the rate of technological change, the gap has widened immensely. And yeah, your panelists on the session before, when they're talking about not being able to see banks ever being disrupted, and people pushing back against crypto, I think that's probably a well-held view against people like ourselves sitting here chatting away. But if you ask the same question to a 20-year-old, I think you get a very different answer. And it's it's interesting. Like, we can remember actually going into, if you're starting business, probably going into a local bank branch and speaking to a bank manager, having a relationship and all that. And I think banks back then to the way they're viewed now may be very different. So I guess as a way of saying, I think you need to engage with a younger audience in a way that's relevant to them. And as I sort of alluded to before, if you're just putting a 30-second ad as you would normally do in a TV show in front of them, that they're not going to resonate with it. So it's about actually sort of authentically connecting with them about their passion points and what they're interested in. And I think esports and gaming is an easy one, because there's a very large percentage of that population that is interested in it. But we work with if some of the brands and partners we have for some of our esports teams. But we have HSBC Bank, and HSBC Bank is not a young hit brand, and they sort of acknowledge that. We sit down and speak to them. They say, we know how to host something at the rugby, the tennis, or the golf, and we can market to middle-aged males absolutely fantastically in a corporate setting. But they realise now that even if they're not the major spenders relevant for HSBC, which is obviously quite corporate focused, at some stage that they need to become more relevant. And if you look at the neobanks coming through, they pretty much got blindsided by them when it came to something like FX, and there were very niches where there has been disruption coming through. Again, not to completely upend the industry, but I think they're realising they need to be on the front foot and connecting with the younger audience as customers potentially, but just even just to understand that the next generation coming through is incredibly important. So I think one is being authentic and having your messaging right with something that resonates with that generation, and having people that actually understand that generation. Because as I said, if you're trying to speak to them from a long way away, it is when it comes to age groups. I spend a lot of time hanging out with them. I'm a big kid in some ways, but you do need young people around you to connect with those young people. And then, as I alluded to before, the platforms that sort of social media, and like, if we're talking about social media, we might be talking about Facebook, but people of the younger generation will be laughing talking about Facebook is very much okay boomer. They hang out on different platforms, and even my young kids who are 8 and 10 try to explain linear television to them, that they had to sit down at a certain time to watch a certain thing. It just they can't actually get their head around it. So I think those are the key points to actually engage with these people where they're comfortable being engaged with, and do it authentically.
Yeah, no, and you touched on the big words there, which was around authenticity and messaging, and you recognizing that itself, it translates to how you're operating internally, and adapting to what's going on currently. And that takes a resilient mindset to actually accept some things that you're not agreeing to or that you've done previously, right? So being authentic at the same time being progressive minded. Yeah. So David, tell us a little bit more about leadership across diverse teams. You've had leadership roles in different types of sectors, different types of settings. What are some of the practical strategies that you'd recommend to not only business leaders, but also individuals that are looking to come in to become entrepreneurs or business leaders? How can they foster not only teamwork, but also these different models? We've talked about it a little bit more, but how can they drive success into building their new ventures or scaling up, for that matter?
It's a little bit textbook, but I think vision is the key. Having a vision and getting everyone to buy into it. And it's easy in some of the sectors I've been working in traditional sports or esports or gaming, is that there's a lot of very passionate people, but at the same time, sometimes, yeah, there was also a saying, if you're passionate, go buy a ticket, because it is really hard work, and so it can't be just about doing something fun, even though these sectors can be sort of a little bit more fun and glamorous to work in. It needs to be about really trying to achieve something. And in esports and gaming, it's, you don't want to be negative, but there's almost the common enemy of being talked down to by the generations above and not taking us seriously, or our passions sort of go outside and get some fresh air, as opposed to doing doing the things you're passionate about. So yeah, there is a bit of a rallying cry to, hey, this can be real. Well, this is a real thing, and yeah, the older generations may not accept it, but we know in time we're building something that's going to keep coming bigger and bigger. And that's just obviously esports and gaming, but with any startup, there is a degree of disruption, and to disrupt it, you do need the common enemy, whether it's a big bank or someone else that you're trying to get some people to do something to make it better, so everyone can celebrate doing something in a better way. But I think it's so important, because nothing goes to plan. If it was easy, someone else would have done it. So, and that probably comes, which will be a third point in future, is about grit. But I think the vision is, it can't be, people aren't doing it for the money, maybe the long-term money, because there's a big upside. But yeah, startups are hard work. It's a lot of hours, and it's, yeah, you are hand to mouth all of the time. Everyone's just trying to get to that next capital raise, that next event. So it's certainly not easy. So that's why you just need a bunch of people who believe in what they're doing, and to believe in what they're doing, they need to buy into the vision of the leader above it.
Yeah.
And then I said, yeah, grit is probably one of the other key pieces. And people ask me what the key trait for an entrepreneur is, and I honestly believe it is grit. It's just that ability to keep going, and no one gets the model right first time. There's just so many pivots, and it really is just a game of survival until you get it right. But yeah, I said, you see all the success stories, and we're very good about building folklore around your Musks and your Zuckerbergs, and even those layers down in the local community. But I think you need to be realistic about the odds. Like far less than 1 in 10 will succeed when it comes to startups. And like, even if you're an absolute gun and have pulled off major exits, your success rate is still only about 1 in 4. So I think it's a combination of getting people excited about a vision, and then just having the grit that you're going to have to keep going for a long time. How you instill grit in your team is another one, but I think it is very much around leading by example, and being down in the trenches with them. Although that does flip into another problem when you try to scale up, and it's one I've had myself. Whereas once you get that past that 50-person sort of head count, it's very difficult just to have that startup culture where we're all in this together, and you start needing those layers and management and all that stuff that is starting to turn you into the big corporate you were trying to get away from.
Yeah, no, and David, this is a good segue to that, and I completely align with what you mentioned about vision and grit. Vision, even though it's textbook, unless it's intentionally reviewed, and you delve into what it actually means for you and for your company, it doesn't really happen, because you could again be textbook and say, well, yeah, that's vision, then park it out there, but you need to live it, right? So it comes down to being intentional about it. So completely agree with it. But keen to just segue into that. How do you build that resilience in all this changing landscape here? How do you cultivate vision? How do you cultivate grit? How do you cultivate that element of resilience within teams or startups to scale ups and so forth? Navigating through those uncertainties and bringing more how do you do that in your view? What's your advice?
I think transparency generally is the key, and you find that a lot, particularly with the younger generation. We obviously employ a lot of young people. We sort of roll our eyes at millennials, but millennials are in their 30s now. You've got Gen Zs, and then you've got this other generation after that. So, and resilience, again, now I'm sort of talking like the old boomer, but this next generation coming through, I wouldn't say resilience is necessarily a strong point. And in some ways, that's a good thing, because I think we've progressed as a society, and we are, yeah, we do look after people a lot better, all the way down to particularly minorities, etc. But at the same time, it's great people talk about mental health, etc. But I think at the same time, it may be softening up this next generation coming through, and when the hard times hit, it is particularly hard for them. So I think really being transparent upfront about the challenges you are facing as a leader and as an organisation to help them understand and buy into it is really important. And yeah, for all the vision and the hype and the pumping people up, I think exposing them to some of the real challenges that are facing, and that reality check about where the business is, and if certain things do or don't happen, where it's going to be. So yeah, it's always a fine balance between keeping morale and excitement up, but I think that transparency and that dose of realism does really help as you build the team for the undoubted hard times that are going to come ahead with all the good times.
And would you say, David, that that's it's more about anticipating that, when as you're scaling up, for example, you anticipate and then you're not like surprised, but you're kind of making those intentional moves to scale up, for example, and then if you need to course correct, you will be able to course correct. So do you think that's one of the success criterias, or you just gun
Yeah,
forward?
it's hard. I do flip between this as well. Like a lot of my thoughts are contradictory. As far as I think you do need to burn the boats and go 100% at it. Otherwise, otherwise people are going to start
Right.
taking the soft options and not plow ahead with that grit needed. But at the same time, you do need a plan B, C, D, E, and F, because nothing ever turns out the way you want. So I think it's always that mixture of real momentum to go forward, and pushing people along with yourself in a direction. But have that planning that you are going to have to pivot a few degrees left or right along the way, multiple times. And having the transparent, having people on board for the plan. So when the invariable curveballs come,
Mm.
it doesn't knock them too far off course. We're just moving around the obstacles rather than smashing straight into them.
Yeah, yeah. David, we're coming to a close very short, but I do want to ask you something around esports, and you're passionate about it as well. It continues to grow at exponential rate. There's obviously some ongoing debate about sustainability of, rapid expansion of such kind of industries. But from your perspective, what are some of the pitfalls or potential pitfalls of this type of growth? How do you think an industry like this needs to address? But at the same time, how do leaders need to address this concern to ensure long-term viability? What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, we've just been through, and I wanted to say through, we're still in a very tough period. But it's not an esports issue, it's a growth assets issue. I think, yeah, off the pandemic, some fiscal stimulation, low interest rates, everything was turbocharged, and we were getting that hockey stick growth, which was you see it in crypto, etc. We're in the esports winter now. We've been through a crypto winter, etc. So I think I don't believe it's a systemic problem where there's any underlying issue with the industry itself. I think the industry did get ahead of itself, as did many people. Probably the excitement got ahead of a few people, particularly investors. There was a lot of investment that came in. And I always say people think esports and gaming is bigger than it is in the short term, but underestimates how big it's going to be in the long term. Everyone can throw around the big numbers. There's 3 billion gamers. There's over 500 million esports fans. But yeah, how you commercialize them, particularly when a lot of them are in places like China, I think it's very easy to do a market size, a total addressable market deck on the front, and then just get people enamored by the numbers, and we'll work out how to make a business and make some money out of it later. Now I think we've been through that cycle where, particularly 2017, 2018, a lot of investment came in, particularly from venture capitalists in North America. They came to the end of their fund cycle and they wanted a return. They turned off the taps to funding after encouraging people to expand as quickly as possible. And now we're seeing a lot of consolidation in the industry as, the path to profitability and all these revenue, not just revenue, but actually EBITDA and all these things are becoming relevant, and sustainability is now
Yeah.
now something that people need to try and work it out themselves, as opposed to having a bunch of funding and investment just flowing through to hyperscale growth. So I think that the industry is still growing sort of 24-25% on various metrics. Gaming is still going up. I actually fear for traditional sports, where the average age of a lot of sports is getting 1 year older every year, whereas esports, the bottom of the funnel is still filling, but people are staying with it. But yeah, in sort of football, it's 47, I think. In golf, it's almost past the average life expectancy. It's up in your 60s or 70s. So
Wow.
I think if you look at purely at the demographics, esports and gaming is a great place to be. But I think a lot of people got ahead of themselves with valuations and just a time frame on how quickly things are going to happen. So yeah, I think it's a patient game for many growth sectors. But I think if the underlying demographics are going the right direction, then
Yeah.
then it's about surviving until the promised land, as opposed to going backwards.
Yeah, no, wonderful. No, thank you for that, Dave. We're coming to a close here. Look, we're in a complex type of an environment, and complexity can be defined differently to different people. But in your view, what's your challenge to business leaders, entrepreneurs, young people looking to get into business? How do they need to navigate through this complexity, inner, outer? What's your challenge back to them?
I see it as an opportunity rather than a challenge. As I said, if things were easy, anyone could do them. So uh, yeah, and my view is everything's a journey. Starting off as a physio, running out onto a cricket field. Where I'm sitting today, there a convoluted path, but there was a path along that way. So I think is just continue to challenge yourself, and taking on complex issues and challenges is the way to grow. And yeah, if you still haven't worked out the end point, that's not a major issue.
Yeah,
It's sort of it's a path, it's a journey.
yeah,
Do things you enjoy, you're passionate about, but yeah, keep throwing yourself into those complex challenges, and then hopefully something will come out the other side that you're proud of. But it's complexity isn't a bad thing, and if you're worried about it, it's going to be an issue, because the complexity of the world is actually increasing exponentially. So
exactly. Yeah,
that's not going to change anytime soon.
yeah, yeah. No, Dave, very insightful discussion and great tips there. Thank you very much for making the time to speak with me. And this is just such an important topic, but you've been able to bring out some of the nuances and similarities, and some great insights to entrepreneurs, but also individuals and leaders. So thank you very much for that inspiring set of insights. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me, Steve.
Okay, cheers.